So for a continuation of the scatter plot stuff, we're going to start looking at trend lines. So trying to make predictions from our scatter plots. So if we're looking at trend lines, a scatter plot demonstrates a linear relationship, or when a scatter plot demonstrates a linear relationship, a straight line can be used to show the general pattern of the data. A trend line or line of best fit, so you will hear that being used often. A line of best fit is a straight line that should lie as close as possible to the points of data in a scatter plot. So if we're looking at these trend lines that we have that they've drawn on here, if you look at this first one, our data is going this way. So our trend line would not work. This would be no, because it is the wrong way. On this one, if you notice that it is going right through the center of the data, that would be a good trend line. However, on number 3, this would not be a good example of a trend line because you want your line to go through the middle of your data like I drew there. And this one would also not be a good example because it's very much below the data instead of going through the center of the data. Now, let me kind of give you just a little bit of an information on this. So whenever we're looking at this, you want to try and draw your trend line as best as possible. So when you draw your trend line, it may not be exactly like mine. So we may come up with numbers that are slightly off from each other. And that's okay, just as long as it's close to mine, right? Because we're making predictions and we can never be perfect when we are making predictions. So if we're going through this or on this here, if I go to put my line of best fit through here, and like I said, when I draw mine, it may not be perfect either because I never draw the exact same trend line twice to get the same answer. Like what I drew on my practice, my notes page may not look what I draw here. And whenever I do it in class tomorrow, or I guess in this sense today, it may not look exactly like this one does. So you want it to be close. Now, you have to look very carefully about what it's asking you. So it wants to know when X is 10, about how much is Y going to be. Now on my one that I drew the other day, I have 4 on there, but on this one, it's about 3.5. So it could be anywhere from 3 to 4 that you got on here. So your Y value would be, I have 3.5 on this example, but the one on my other paper has around 4, and that's okay. So if you're looking at the key and yours isn't exactly like mine, but it's close, that's good enough, right? And I have it drawn on there what the trend lines are. I have my trend lines drawn on the other paper too. So I also want to know when Y is equal to 6. So if I go across here and go down, it's at about 6. So my X value would be around X equals, I have on my other paper 5.5 to anywhere to 6 would be sufficient. So the thing is making sure that you are trying to go through the middle of your data the best that you can. So whenever I'm looking at this one, oopsie. Trying to make it go through the center as best I can, right? I'm not going to ever be perfect at it, but all I can do is the best that I can. Now, I want to just discuss with you this little point that is over here so that you understand that vocabulary. This point right here that we see is called an outlier, and it kind of makes sense. It lies out by itself. It's something that is random or an accident, not typical. For example, like the snow that we had this year. That's not typical of a normal winter for us. So that would be like an outlier. Okay, our weather would be like an outlier in that sense. So whenever you're drawing your trend lines, you kind of want to leave that outlier alone. It's not part of trying to go through the middle of that because that is something that doesn't trend with the other data. So I'm looking for when X is equal to 5. So I'm going to go here when X is equal to 5 up to my trend line and go over. So I have anywhere around 160. So I'm thinking anywhere when my Y value would be around 160 to 170. Then if I try to do it says when Y is, when Y is 225. So when I know that Y is 225, I'm going to go all the way over here and down. So my X value would be about 9. So I hope you're kind of seeing how you do your trend lines through that. So on this one, again, we have a couple more outliers. So making sure that you would probably just leave those guys alone, right? So this is an outlier, this is an outlier. They kind of are different from our data. So I'm going to look at when x is equal to 2. So if I go up here and then I go over, it's at about 35. So my y value would be about 35. And then when I want to know when y is 5, my x value would be about 8. So x would be about 8. So remember, this is my y-axis, this is my x-axis. So on each one of these, you're really just going to have to draw your trend line and make solid estimates about it. So coming through here and trying to draw your line as best as possible. Again, like I said, I'm not perfect at this, so it's doing the best that you can. So when x is equal to 7, so I'm going to go right here at 7. Let me change this and make it a little bit smaller. When x is equal to 7, then I'm going to go over, and it is about at 6. So on my other paper, I have 7, so it could be anywhere from 6 to 7. And then when y is equal to 18, so I'm going to go up here to 18 and then go down, I would say that x is about 3. Again, going through and drawing my trend line the best I can through the center of the data. Obviously throwing out that outlier, so I'm not going to have that guy part of that. And looking at when x is equal to 6. So I'm going to go all the way up and over. And so I could say that my y value would be about 900. When y is 700, I could say my x value would be about 4. So that should kind of help you out in seeing that. It's really just making predictions from your data. So drawing those trend lines on there to be able to see. So when x is equal to 8, so I'm going to go up and over. So I know that it is going to be about 20. And when my y value is 25, I know my x value would be about 6. And then it's going into and reading now and in kind of like making predictions and adjustments and whatnot. So if I go and try and draw my trend line through here, this one's not very good. This one's kind of a hard one because the dots are kind of weird. So trying to do the best that you can through the middle. So if Karen has 12 items, so I'm going to look down here for number of items and I'm going to look at 12. She has about 12 items. About how much should it weigh? So if you go over, it's a little bit below 12, so I would say it would be about 11 pounds. When Bo's suitcase weighs 16 pounds, so if it weighs 16 pounds, what is not a reasonable prediction of the number of items in his suitcase? So if you look at 16 items, that's nowhere near. Well, 16 items, I guess it kind of is kind of near because you have this dot down here that's around 16. Oh man, I'm getting all confused. Okay, never mind. So let me rephrase that. So on here, a reasonable prediction, right? So if we're over here, 16 pounds, we're up here and we're thinking it's around 20 items, right? Would it be reasonable to even think 13 items would work? It would not be reasonable that 13 items would work because all of these are closer to 20 than 13 is. Okay, so if I want to predict if 4 items are packed inside of a suitcase, I could predict that it would be about 7 pounds. On my other paper, I have 8. So again, 7, 8 pounds. And if I wanted to predict at 11 pounds, 11 pounds, if I went up and over, it would be anywhere like, 11, I went the wrong way. So 11 pounds, I would start over here and go over and then go down. So it would be about 10 items, 10, 12. So you could say anywhere from 10 to 12 items would be a good prediction. Okay, so you have a couple, well, I guess you have another paper to practice on for this. I have it attached. You also have your formative for today. If you have any questions, you can hop on Zoom.